Sometime in 1952, Bishop Petros had been arrested, and he was brought to the central jail in the port of Piraeus. And when he got into the jail cell, there was already another prisoner there, sitting across from him. And this jail was a notorious jail, was filled with communists and accused communists. But this one particular prisoner, smoking his cigarette, blowing smoke, looked at Bishop Petros and started up a conversation. And he explained, as Bishop Petros would tell us, he explained what he had done, his crime, with glee. He had slit the throat of a sailor right on the front steps of the police station because this sailor had somehow dishonored his daughter. And he waited to hear what comment Bishop Petros would make, and of course, what could you say in a situation like this? And Bishop Petros just remained silent. And finally, the prisoner, this man, took another drag on his cigarette, and he said, papuli, so what are you in for? And Bishop Petros just looked and said, I'm an old calendarist.
Sometime in the afternoon of July 11th, 1952, at New York City's Idlewild International Airport, a long-bearded, ponytailed, black-robed figure wearing a stove-topped hat stepped out of the 9th century off of an airplane and into the middle of the 20th century. That figure was a Greek Orthodox monk from Mount Athos, where the way of life was as ancient, slow-paced, and studied as New York's was modern, hurried, and spontaneous. That monk was a 35-year-old priest named Petros Astifidis. Father Petros had left his homeland along with its way of life and the holy mountain Athos, and came to America for what he believed was a temporary stay. Because he had recently suffered persecution in Greece, even being sent to jail because of his involvement and support of the outlawed Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece, he reluctantly accepted an invitation to come to America. It was on these shores where he would find some respite from intolerance and persecution. New York offered religious freedom and a chance to minister to other traditionalist Orthodox Christians who had arrived here earlier. He never expected to stay long, but God had other plans. He would remain in America for 45 years, where he would struggle to preserve the ancient apostolic faith of the Old World and to live the way of life it prescribed. It was a struggle that he would maintain for the rest of his long life.
Jailhouse of Chios, January 6th, 1948. Greetings, dear Brother Petros. Please be informed that the Lord made us worthy of His love by being in prison for His sake. Makarios, Eleftherios, Savas, Elias, Nikiforos and I were arrested and incarcerated. If only you could have been here, brother, to see the faithful courage and excellent witness we gave to the court. The jury saw that we were truly in the right, despite the accusations of Bishop Panteleimon of Chios. The love of our Lord, may his name be glorified, caused us unworthy ones to be made worthy of imprisonment for the faith. We venerate your right hand. Harmang Stephanos Sigoras, Mang Eleftherios, Mang Elias, Mang Nikiforos, Mang Makarios, Mang Savas.
Ο Παντελεήμων τους είχε καλέσει να πάνε κάτω στη Μητρόπολη γιατί τους ειδοποίησε ότι πρέπει θα τους βγάλει από το μοναστήρι αν δεν γυρίσουν με το νέο.
Ποιο μοναστήρι?
Πάνω, τον Άγιο Μάρκο. Τον Άγιο Μάρκο. Και έτσι αναγκαστήκαν και πήγαν τα παιδιά κάτω, σε πήραν εκεί, μέσα στη Μητρόπολη. Ο καθένας έδωσε την απάντησή του, ένας έτσι, άλλος αλλιώς, δεν ξέρω και τι λέγανε, αλλά θυμάμαι που λέγανε πως ο Νικηφόρος που ήταν κουτσό το παιδί, δεν είχε καλά τα πόδια του, προχώρησε και εκείνος να πάει κοντά και είπε ότι δεν αρνούμε, εγώ είμαι με το παλαιό, δεν αρνούμε να γίνω με το νέο, να γυρίσω και τούτο και εκείνο, του είπε πολλά. Και ο ένας, δεν ξέρω, ο παπάς ήταν, καλόγερος ήταν εκεί κάτω, του δίνει μια σπροξιά και πέφτει κάτω το παιδί κάτω. Ναι. Και ύστερα τους παίρνει κατευθείαν, τους βάλει στο κάρο και τους πηγαίνει στο κουρείο, τους ξυρίζει, τους κόβει τα μαλλιά τους, όλα καλά. Ναι, βγάζει τα ράσα και τους πηγαίνει στη φυλακή. Θα ήταν κανένας μήνας μέσα.
Μήνες?
Ναι, μέχρι που να πάει ο γέροντας ο Πέτρος, να βρει τον βουλευτή τον Λεμό, είχε ένα φίλο που ήταν βουλευτής, να μεσητέψει, να δει, πήγε τα παιδιά μες στην υγρασία. Τα είχαν ούτε κρεβάτι ούτε τίποτα, κάτι τσουβάλια στρωμένα και υγρά και κοιμόταν. Και ο δικός μας δεν είχε. Δηλαδή ήταν λεπτό παιδί και αρρώστησε και κόντεψε να γίνει φυματικός. Και πήγαινε στον γιατρό, τέλος πάντων, ύστερα πια τον πήγαν πάνω στον Άγιο Μάρκο πάλι, πηγαίναμε του περνούσαμε ενέσεις και όλα αυτά, ινσουλίνες, όχι ινσουλίνες, περικυλίνες ήταν όλα. Οι ινσουλίνες είναι για το ζάχαρο. Και πήγε ο γέροντας ο Πέτρος και μίλησε του λαιμού αυτού του. Δεν ξέρω πώς τον έλεγα το όνομά του.
Αντωνίου.
Αντώνης, ναι. Μέμπη Αντώνης. Και πήγε, μίλησε στην αστυνομία, ναι, πέρασε στη φυλακή. Και νομίζω πως τότε τους άρχισαν να τους μεταχειρίζονται πιο καλά, αλλά εν τω μεταξύ τους βγάλανε.
I was around 17 years of age, at the mindless and risky age when every teenager has big dreams about the future. I had just such a dream, which I will not now reveal. But like many a childish dream, it vanished like smoke, and I am glad for that. Now that many years have passed since those days, I am grateful to God that the dream did not become a reality. In May of 1933, my mother passed away, and as is the tradition for the period of mourning, I was wearing dark clothing. I had decided to leave Chios for good, So I embarked on a final tour of the island. I had a letter of introduction from the governor, Leontios Kalvokoresis, to be shown to each town mayor, so that I would be shown hospitality in any town I might pass through. I did visit quite a few towns. It was July, but there was a breeze coming down from the peak of Mount Belineon, cooling me as I climbed the roads of northern Chios.
The young Stephanos did leave Chios that summer, never to return, or at least not as Stephanos. His ultimate reason in leaving was one that was quite opposite to his original reason. He was at the beginning of an incredible journey, a spiritual journey of discovery that would end in America many years and a lifetime later. In January of 1920, a most remarkable document was published in the form of a patriarchal encyclical from the ecumenical throne of Constantinople, New Rome. The encyclical was not addressed unto the Church of Christ everywhere, as had been the tradition for more than a millennium, but it was addressed rather unto the churches of Christ everywhere. What was astonishingly evident from the text was that these hierarchs openly and bareheadedly admitted their conviction that the Orthodox Church was indeed not the one and only holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church. The now infamous encyclical began a decades-long process of modernization that redefined, reimagined, and reconstructed the Orthodox Church. This process became known as the Ecumenical Movement. The movement consisted of a coordinated and well-organized group of national churches from various jurisdictions of the Protestant and Orthodox world. Its stated purpose was to facilitate the melding of all Christian denominations into one united superworld church, a new church for a new order of the world. The leaders of this movement in the Greek-speaking world were the Archbishop of Greece, Christostomos Papadopoulos, and the Patriarch of Constantinople, the notorious Meletios Metaxakis. They shared an ambitious vision of remaking all of Christendom into one new church. In 1948, this worldwide ecumenical movement formalized itself into the organization that adopted the name the World Council of Churches. There is no doubt that this syncretistic organization, with its stated confession of faith that no particular church can consider itself the one and only Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, was heavily influenced by the teachings of the Enlightenment and of Freemasonry. In fact, the leaders of the most dominant members of the World Council of Churches, the Anglican Communion and the Orthodox Church, were heavily infiltrated by Freemasons at the highest levels of the hierarchy. It is a fact of history that Metaxakis himself was a Freemason. Though he died in ignominy before the formal establishment of the World Council of Churches, he laid much of the groundwork for its success. He and his protege, Christostomos Papadopoulos, were so determined to see the success of their vision of a new religion for a new man that they instituted the persecution of all and any Christians in Greece who opposed their vision. In 1924, their first dramatic innovation was the calendar change. One new calendar for one new world. Metaxakis and Papadopoulos, through the network of Freemasonry, prevailed upon the government of Greece to use the force of law in implementing the adoption of the papal Gregorian calendar for use by the Republic of Greece and by the Church of Greece. As it happened, many Greeks were not so easily tempted by the allure of modernism and were not persuaded to abandon holy tradition, their ancient Christian faith, or their way of life. Hundreds of priests, monks, and faithful Christians were arrested and thrown in jail for adhering to the patristic calendar of their forefathers. On the eve of September 14th, 1925, when hundreds of Christians gathered at a church near Athens, Greece to celebrate the Feast of the Holy Cross, a miraculous visage appeared in the sky. Hundreds of people witnessed a huge illuminated cross shining down upon them. Among the witnesses were the policemen who came to arrest the Christians who were breaking the law because they were celebrating the Feast of the Holy Cross on the date of the old calendar, rather than on the official church-mandated new calendar date. The members of this growing resistance to the New World Order came to be known by the pejorative Old Calendarists. As their numbers grew, and more laity and clergy joined their ranks, persecutions against the resistance movement increased. But the vast majority of the hierarchy in the Church of Greece, fearing reprisals and loss of position, went along with this modernistic humanist agenda to become leaders of the new, modern, and official state church. The old calendarist clergy were arrested, had their beards shaved off, were stripped of their clerical garments, dismissed from their positions, and thrown into the street. By request of the hierarchy of the state church, old calendar divine services were violently disrupted by police, who even murdered one pious woman, Akatarina Routis, who came to the defense of her priest as he was about to be struck by a rifle butt. It was into such a family of old calendarists that Stephanos Astifidis was born in 1915. His parents, Maria and Dimitri, were a pious working-class couple of modest means. They instilled their faith into all three of their sons, who remained traditionalist Orthodox Christians all their lives. But there was a brief moment in the young Stephanos' life when he considered the kind of vocation that may not have pleased his pious parents had he embarked upon it. While not in and of itself a sinful career, a life in the theater was one rife with perils and temptations that would be difficult for anyone to withstand. It was just such a life that Stephanos was about to embark on in that summer of 1933. In an interview recorded in 1988, he explained what happened to him that summer.
Well, in order to explain the reason I named the church after Saint Markella, you'd have to permit me to turn back the clock some 55 years to when I was still a youth, around the age of 17 or 18, when I decided to become a monk. Reminiscing now, I get a little emotional, but I'm also joyful. It was when I was at the place of martyrdom of Saint Markella. If you'll permit me, I'd like to read a few lines from my memoirs as to how I began this journey.
Αυτό το βιβλίο είναι η αυτοβιογραφία σας. Μάλιστα.
A small group of us started out from the harbor in Chios town to make our way to the place of martyrdom of St. Markella in order to celebrate her feast day, according to the old calendar, of course. But I started off on my own before the rest of my friends because I was writing an article for a newspaper in Athens about Chios, and I wanted to make a tour of the island to gather information to include it in the article.
Και πριν προχωρήσετε, επειδή αναφέρετε το παλαιό ημερολόγιο, στις μέρες σας είχε γίνει αυτή η μεταρρύθμιση μέσα στον χώρο της Εκκλησίας?
It had happened a few years earlier, yes. Fathers from Mount Athos had arrived in Chios to help start the movement of the old calendarists, as we are even still today labeled. This label I do not personally accept. I am not an old calendarist. I am an Orthodox Christian. What does old calendarist even mean? What does new calendarist even mean? Of course I follow the old calendar. I follow the ways of the Holy Fathers. What we inherited, we continue with and preserve. How they came up with this new calendar, old calendar, I really couldn't care less. By the grace of Christ, I am an Orthodox Christian, and I continue in my Orthodox confession of faith. Moving on, since I went to many villages in Chios, I had a letter of introduction from the governor of Chios, Mr. Kalvokoresis. And they ended up alone at the site of St. Markella's martyrdom on the very eve of her feast day. I will read a few lines from my memoirs regarding this day. Some power was pushing me to go alone to the place of martyrdom. I had heard that the water in the ocean at the very place of her martyrdom would feverishly boil when a priest read the holy water service and the chanters chanted her troparion. I had some free time on my hands as I was early, and my group of friends were not arriving until much later for the feast day. After a 20-minute walk from the church of St. Markella, I arrived at the site of her martyrdom, where the boulder is that contains the body of the saint within it. Honestly, there's a few lines here that maybe I shouldn't read. There's some details about my youth I'd really rather leave out. A little awkward to relate. But you know what? All right, now, I should read them. Why not? Let me read them. In my day, I was a little bit of a hipster. And along with my backpack, I also had my mandolin hanging off my shoulder as I wandered around alone, carrying all my hopes and dreams with me. Before I continued, and before I reached the site of St. Markella's martyrdom, I thought it would be a sin for me to bring my mandolin along with me, so I left it a few yards away. I finally reached that place where, according to tradition, was contained the body of the Virgin Martyr Markella. Every year, on her feast day, when the priest conducts the service, the water around the boulder feverishly boils, and often other miracles occur. I sat there, and I started pondering the story of her martyric death. I saw in my mind's eye an angry man, St. Markella's own father, desperately trying to pull her body out of the boulder. He was possessed with the idea of violating his daughter. But because the boulder would not release her, he became demonized, and his mind was darkened. He took a machete and beheaded his daughter and threw her head into the sea. The boulder and all the rocks along the shore turned red with the virginal blood of Saint Markella. The demoniac father ran off and was never seen again. Now the boulder that still gripped the saint's body softened up and swallowed up all of her body, where to this day it remains. The shrubbery where she attempted to hide from her father has a chapel built over it. Thousands of faithful pilgrims come every year from all over Greece, and even from Asia Minor, to honor the saint. While I was pondering these things, I said some prayers. I said the thrice holy, the Lord's Prayer, and then I began to chant the Troparion of St. Markella, which every Chian is familiar with, submitting to the laws of the Lord's divine teachings, you strove to keep them, etc., etc. My God, what was happening? Fear and panic took hold of me. The water that surrounded the boulder, containing the holy relics of the saint, began to boil violently right in front of me. I was terrified. I couldn't breathe. I ran the entire distance back to the hostel near the main church of St. Markella so fast that I completely forgot about my mandolin. I arrived back at the hostel utterly traumatized. This happens regularly, every year, on the feast day of the saint, when the priest conducts the service. Yes, but after it swallowed up her remains, it slid further into the water. And it is at that precise spot that the water boils and steams when a priest reads the service to the saint. This awesome thing happened right in front of me when I was just 17 years old. I said a few short prayers and the water boiled. All my big plans and dreams vanished. I decided to become a monk. But how that happened is interesting. After the miracle happened to me, when I was sitting there all alone back in the courtyard of the hostel, contemplating my future, I suddenly felt a hand tapping on my shoulder. I turned to see my brother, Father Nifon, who was already a monk. He said to me, "Stefanaki," that's what they called me back then. I became Petros after I became a monk. "Stefanaki, what are you thinking about so deeply? About going and becoming a monk on the Holy Mountain?" "Yes," I answered him. It was the 22nd day of July, and by the 15th of August, I was on the Holy Mountain, Athos, quite determined to become a monastic. The beautiful thing is, well, I had no idea or any concept of the Holy Mountain. And when I was disembarking off the ferry at the dock, all the bells of the Holy Mountain were ringing. And I thought that they were ringing for me. But someone told me that it was the 15th of August, with the old calendar, the feast day of the Dormition of the All-Holy Theotokos, and the bells were ringing for her, not for me.
Στα μάτια του κόσμου, στα αυτιά των πολλών ανθρώπων, αυτό θα φανεί σαν μια απόφαση απόγνωσης. Αλλά από ό,τι καταλαβαίνω, το θαύμα αυτό έγινε αιτία μάλλον να θεωρήσετε τη μοναχική πολιτεία με άλλο πρίσμα. Τι είναι αυτό ακριβώς το γνώρισμα της μοναχικής πολιτείας? Τι είναι ο μοναχός τελικώς?
Ο μοναχός εσύ τάξης και κατάστασης ασωμάτων, βιούντων εν σώματι.
A true monk dwells in the realm of the bodiless powers, because a true monk imitates the life of the bodiless powers. I am not worthy to comment on the monastic way of life, because there are many fathers, saints of the Church, that struggled in the monastic way of life and are worthy of that axiom. They lived the angelic schema, with trials of asceticism and daily divine liturgies, chanting the Psalms, and especially through self-denial. I did enter the garden of the All-Holy. Some other time I could tell you what I experienced there, through various trials, both from unclean spirits and at the hands of my brothers in Christ.
Δηλαδή, μέσα στο μοναστήρι θα μπορούσαμε να πούμε ότι πράγματι το μοναστήρι είναι μια παλέστρα πνευματική, όπου ο άνθρωπος αναχωνεύεται πνευματικός, αναγεννάται πνευματικός
και έρχεται σε επαφή με τον πνευματικό όντως κόσμο.
Υπάρχει πνευματικός κόσμος.
Μάλιστα, υπάρχει πνευματικός κόσμος.
Και μέσα εκεί γνωρίζουμε τον Κύριό μας.
But I fear that if I describe all the things that I have seen and tasted, and the mental trials, and all the supernatural experiences I had on the Holy Mountain, no one would believe it. To a great extent, my martyrdom would take place twice a week, when below our monastery the ferry that left Mount Athos and returned back to Chios passed below. The ship would blow its whistle, greeting us, and monks from all the balconies and windows of their monastic cells would wave vigorously in response. I would wave with one hand, and unfortunately with the other I'd be holding up the monastery's binoculars to my eyes. My heart would be beating so fast I thought it might explode. The ship was passing by and leaving me behind in the place of my self-imposed exile. Martyrdom, true martyrdom. At the end of that August, I would turn 18. Who can understand how I was feeling? Only one who has experienced the same. Most novices in the monastic life will understand what I was feeling and experiencing, such as the attacks of demons that would come at night. My God, where should I begin? How can I relate the shocking and revolting appearances of the demons that appeared to me every night? They were doing their best to destroy me from fear and exhaustion from the lack of sleep. The difficulty in describing what I was going through stems from the fact that I did not know if I was dreaming or awake or in the alpha state of consciousness. The torture started every midnight. After I completed my prayer rule on my prayer rope, my usual amount of prostrations, my body would be dead tired. I would lie down to rest. It was impossible to sleep. I would hear a growl. My hair would stand up. I would become paralyzed with fright as horrific images would appear. I do not know how long these episodes lasted, maybe seconds, maybe hours. When I would pick up my hand to make the sign of the cross on myself, it would be heavy, like lead. I couldn't move it. An invisible hand would muffle my mouth to keep me from calling on Christ. 4 invisible hands would raise my bed all the way up to the ceiling of my room. Other times, beautiful violin music would wake me up, and my soul would be carried away with nostalgia. Sometimes I would hear melancholy music through the window of my cell. Another time, after midnight, a triple cursed demon came to the door of my cell and imitated the voice of Father Ananias, my spiritual father. "Wake up, my son," he would say. "Get up and do your canona, your prayer rule." I knew it was a deception, because Father Ananias was sick and bedridden for weeks. So I tried to ignore the voice until the clock would chime for the appropriate time to arise. I became sleep-deprived. Sometimes the demons would shout at me from the darkness, "We will force you out of here. Leave, leave. We will carry you out of here while you're still in your bed." On another night, the demons succeeded in deceiving me by tempting me with loud banging that suddenly arose from Father Haralambos' cell, which was next to mine. I believed that the kind monk was banging a spoon on his clock, causing me to wake in a fright. I cursed the monk to the devil. That was what the demon wanted. As soon as the curse left my lips, all was silence. The banging stopped. A shadowy figure walked into my room and approached my bed. I was trembling. I tried to make the sign of the cross, but that proved impossible. My arm became like cast iron, immovable. I tried calling on the name of the Lord, and after much agony, I was able to shout, "Lord Jesus Christ!" An invisible hand slapped me fiercely in the face. The shadow disappeared. I cried like a child. I began to become accustomed to the demonic attacks, and they in fact benefited my soul. They solidified my decision to live the angelic life, far from the sinful world, and to try and attain eternal salvation.
Πήγατε στο Άγιον Όρος ποια χρονολογία ακριβώς?
Το 1933.
1933, on the 15th of August, the feast day of the All-Holy Mother of God, according to the reckoning of the Orthodox calendar.
Αυτή τη στιγμή, η πρώτη σας εμπειρία όταν πατήσετε μέσα στο περιβόλι, καταρχήν, γιατί περιβόλι της Παναγίας, το Άγιον Όρος?
Γιατί ο ίδιος ο Υιός της, ο Κύριος ημών Ιησούς Χριστός,
Because her very Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, gave it to her, just as she asked of him. It is called a garden, or an orchard, due to its topography and flora, and it is seeded with monasteries, etc.
Και τα μοναστήρια είναι πανάρχια. Βεβαίως. Εσείς σε ποια σκήτη πήγατε? Σε ποιο... Καταρχήν είπα τη λέξη σκήτη τώρα. Τι σημαίνει σκήτη? Είπαμε μοναστήρια. Σε ποιο σημείο του Αγίου Όρους εσείς πήγατε?
Στο άκρο του Αγίου Όρους είναι μεγάλη.
High up on the holy mountain there is a large and famous skeet named after Saint Anna. When I first arrived there, there were at least 65 occupied cells.
Μπορείτε σας παρακαλώ με λεπτομέρεια να μας εκθέσετε τι εστί σκήτη, ποια είναι η διαφορά μεταξύ σκήτεως και μοναστηριού?
Ωραία. Τα μοναστήρια.
Monasteries are divided into two main categories, Cenobitic and Idiorhythmic. The Idiorhythmic monasteries are less strict. In the Cenobitic monasteries, life is more strict. Synovio,
bile, meaning communal life. Those monks who desired a more ascetical life fled to the more remote and desolate areas or deserts of the Holy Mountain, where they established skeets, as in asceticism or ascetical. There are many skeets on Mount Athos: St. Anna, New Skeet, the Skeet of St. Basil.
Αυτές οι σκήτες από τα μοναστήρια.
Από τα μοναστήρια, μάλιστα.
Η δική σας σκήτη.
Στη Μονή της Αγίας Γάβρας.
Το μεγαλύτερο μοναστήρι το Αγίου Όρους αυτό.
Αχ, παιδί μου.
Ah, my son, if you pressure me enough, I could tell you so many things about that monastery. You could gain much from my experiences.
Τι να σας πω, θα μάθετε πολλά πράγματα γύρω από τα Αγίου Όρους, τα οποία εξ ιδίας πείρας έχω να αναφέρω.
Χαιρόμαστε απόψε που μας τα λέτε όλα αυτά, Γέροντα. Ποιες ήταν οι πρώτες σας εμπειρίες στο περιβόλι αυτό της Παναγιάς μας?
Οι πρώτες μου εμπειρίες.
My first experience. The Holy Fathers write, "Whosoever has defeated the flesh, the same has been victorious over nature, and he who is victorious over nature has become supernatural." It is truly a great mystery. It is ineffable and impossible to explain how one can stand in opposition to all the desires of the flesh and endure as a monastic. There is no language capable of conveying this. One can only experience it. The warfare is relentless, but the obedience of a monk gives him great strength. It makes him strong enough to wage war against the flesh and live an angelic life while still in this world.
Πριν προχωρήσετε, θα ήθελα να σας ζητήσω κάτι. Επειδή είπατε το θέμα της υπακοής. Εσείς σαν μοναχός, σαν δόκιμος μοναχός, σαν νέο παιδί που μπήκατε μέσα στο μοναστήρι, σε ποιο μοναστήρι ακριβώς πρώτο μπήκατε μέσα?
Μου θυμίζεις κάτι το οποίο...
You're reminding me of something that comes to mind now and brings me joy. When I first arrived to the administration center at St. Anna, and as I stepped off the ferry boat, an old monk who was from St. Mark's Monastery in Chios, Father Ignatios, approached me. He asked me, "Why did you come here? Where do you want to go? Do you want to become a monk?" "Yes," I told him. He then said, "Listen here, son. There are many skeets here and various obediences in each skeet. Some paint icons, some make shirts, some darn socks."
Όχι, παιδί μου.
Αυτή είναι η φήμη που κυκλοφορεί. Κάποιος όποιος είναι τεμπέλης θα πάει να γίνει μοναχός. Αυτό λένε οι άνθρωποι. Όχι όλοι οι άνθρωποι, βεβαίως.
Anyway, Father Ignatios was testing me. He saw me in my fancy clothes and probably thought to himself, "From what aristocratic lineage does this one come from?" And he claims he wants to become a monk. That is why he questioned me as to my preferences. Now, from my youth, I loved painting, and I had a small portfolio of my work, but I answered him, "Elder, send me wherever you want. It matters little to me. I came here to become a monk. If you want to send me to the art studio, send me. You decide," I said. He seemed pleased with my answer and understood my disposition. He gave me a monastic satchel and an old cassock. I shed my worldly clothing and took the steep path up to the skeet of St. Anna, to the cells of the Brotherhood of the Venerable Cross. This was a virtuous brotherhood, with 4 actual brothers from Volos in Chios. Father Ananias and his 3 brothers were actually iconographers. God enlightened Father Ignatios to send me there. But they tested me first. I went through many trials through them. Instead of assigning me to paint icons, they sent me to the olive press where I had to turn a huge stone. I would get dizzy. I would throw up. I couldn't handle it. I asked myself, what am I doing here? But what choice did I have? The monastic obeys. The monk always responds to any command with, "May it be a blessing."
Πριν προχωρήσετε πιο πολύ στη διοίκηση, είπατε ότι σας έβαλε ένα παλιόρασο. Δηλαδή γίνατε δόκιμος εκείνη την ημέρα?
Όχι να δει, διότι ύστερα από το ωραίο κουστούμι. Όταν μου το βγάζει και μου βάλει ένα τετριμένο, ένα παλιό ράσο.
Καλά, αυτό που θέλω να ρωτήσω είναι το εξής, δηλαδή, ότι αμέσως γίνεται κανείς μοναχός όταν πηγαίνει στο Άγιο Όρος επάνω.
Όχι, είναι δόκιμο.
No, like I was telling you earlier, one must be tested for a period as a novice. I was tested at various obediences, the olive press, but when I failed at that, I was sent to the fishing boats. When I failed at that, I was finally sent to the icon studios. Do you understand? It was not until after at least 6 months of trials such as these that I was read the prayer and tonsured a rassophore monk, or cassock-wearing monk, which is the first of the 3 stages of monasticism. The second stage is called stavrophoros, or cross-bearer. The first stage consists of a simple tonsure prayer, where one announces his intention to become a monk and separate from the world. We could compare it to an engagement to be married. After 3 years, at the earlier stages, one is then permitted to proceed to the third and final stage and become a great schema monk. The great schema monk takes very serious vows where he renounces everything of the world. It is very difficult.
Έστω, γιατί ξέρω περίπου είναι 9 οι υποσχέσεις που δίνει ο μοναχός.
Τι προσήλθες τέκνον, μου λέει ο ιερεύς. Ποθώ το βίο της ασκήσεως, τιμία πάτερ. Ποθείς εκείνο, μάλιστα αρνείσαι πατέρα, αρνείσαι μητέρα, αρνείσαι συγγενείς, πατρίδα, ναι του Θεού συνεργούνται ως τιμία πάτερ.
So you make your vows to renounce the world, and you promise obedience to your spiritual father and to the brotherhood.
Υποσχέσεων δίδεται και η υπόσχεση της Παρθενίας.
Εννοείται.
Yes, chastity is the most important vow. One cannot be a monastic and not be chaste.
Μία ερώτηση τώρα, ακριβώς σε αυτό το θέμα. Μπορεί ποτέ ο μοναχός που έχει δώσει αυτές τις υποσχέσεις να επανέλθει στον κόσμο και να υπάρχει ελπίς σωτηρίας?
Όχι.
No, except by economia. For example, myself. How am I here in the world? How am I here in America?
Και να τον στείλει η Εκκλησία σε ιεραποστολή, ούτως ώστε να κηρύττει το Λόγο του Θεού ως ιερομόναχος, ως Αρχιμανδρίτης στον κόσμο, ενώ κυρίως
να αποβάλει το σχήμα.
Μπορεί να αποβάλει κανείς το σχήμα και να παραμένει μέλος της Εκκλησίας?
No, it is a great sin. It is to become a deserter. But there always is a chance for repentance if one is truly remorseful and weeps for his errors.
Να δακρύσει, να κλάψει, διότι λέγουν οι πατέρες ότι και δάκρυ στάξαν ισοδυναμεί το γενεσίας.
The tears of repentance have such power that through them all can be forgiven. But when a monk has abandoned his vows, repentance is extremely difficult. We have seen many examples of this.
Όταν λέγεται ότι μετανοεί, πρέπει να επανέλθει πάλι στο σχήμα.
Να επανέλθει στο σχήμα, μάλιστα.
Γιατί υπάρχει μια περίεργος νοοτροπία εδώ στον κόσμο, ότι μπορεί κάποιος άμα αλλάξει τη γνώμη του να αφήσει τη μοναχική πολιτεία, ενώ κάτι τέτοιο είναι.
Before he makes his vows, he is free to go. That is why he is called a novice. Novice means one who is being tested.
Εκείνος που έχει αφιερωθεί στον Κύριο. Εσείς λοιπόν λάβετε το μέγα σχήμα εις το Άγιον Όρος. Πού όμως λάβετε τη ρασοευχή σας?
It's a long story, my son. I was tonsured a rassophore monk at the cells of the Brotherhood of the Holy Ascension of our Lord. The elder of the Brotherhood was the thrice blessed Father Nicodemus. I named my spiritual son after him, Father Nicodemus, who now continues our struggle at our church in Montreal. My spiritual father, Geronda Nicodemus, was a very pious and charitable man from Cyprus. The Russians on the Holy Mountain would call him Blavoslavin Nikodim, the Blessed Nicodemus, because of his very charitable nature. I was in his hands, and later he even took in my own father. Yes, my father became a monk on the Holy Mountain. My brother was already a monk there. Oh, what trials I can tell you about that I suffered when I tried to greet my father upon his arrival in Mount Athos. I was forbidden from speaking to him, to test me.
Γιατί αυτές οι αυστηρότητες
μα τι να πω, δοκιμασίες είναι αυτές.
Μήπως για την ταπείνωση, για να επέρθει η υπακοή πιο πολύ στο μοναχό μέσα?
Δεν διεξετάσεις.
They were tests. A monk gets tested, just like a soldier does. Just think, when my father first came to Mount Athos, I was told I could not speak to him. I can't speak to my own father? That is correct. You have no blessings to speak to your father. So when my father came up to our monastery and knocked on the door, I quickly ran to my cell and started to cry. I did not have the strength to resist this temptation. I heard my father's voice asking, "Where are my children? Where is my Stepanaki? Where is Father Nifon?" Someone told him, "You have no children here." My father was shocked. Eventually we were given blessings to speak with our father, but such are the trials on the Holy Mountain. That is true. Extremely strict. And I went through many such trials to learn obedience.
Κατ' ουσίαν όμως γίνεται από απανθρωπιά δηλαδή αυτή η υπόθεση.
Όχι, δοκιμασία είναι.
These things seem strange when you hear them. Another example, my brother Father Nifon and I would always go together to gather firewood for the stove. On this particular day, he would not speak a word to me all along the road. We went about doing our work, and I noticed that he was muttering under his breath. I figured that he must be saying these salutations to the Theotokos. I thought that when he finished, he would talk to me. He finished the salutations, but he would still not speak. After we returned to the monastery, I learned that the elder had given him the command to say the Jesus prayer continuously and not to speak to me. This was another test. We were to avoid idle talk. Because of idle talk, no one can escape falling into sin. One starts to judge others, fantasies enter the mind, and many other pitfalls are associated with idle chatter. A powerful weapon against the devil. The prayer of prayers. It is the invocation of the Lord. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me. It is a weapon against the devil. Not only monks say it. All Christians who follow the path to salvation say it. I also see it being done right here in America. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me.
Να έχετε μέσα στο νου σας παρά να συζητάτε.
Yes, but at that young age, for me, to see my father and brother and not to be permitted to speak to them was a difficult, it was even a painful thing. But it was the will of God, and we endured all our trials. And by the grace of the Lord, both me and my brother were victorious.
This is New York City's theater district. It has been said that one arrives here on the wings of a dream. It was on just such wings that the young Stephanos Astifidis had hoped to fly away from Chios, and he may have ended up right here on the Great White Way with his name up in lights as an actor. But Stephanos decided to become a monk instead, because of the miracle that changed his heart. The heart of a man is a fickle thing, and the road of a monastic is perilously full of temptations that can divert a less than stout-hearted monk from the narrow path. If not for one mysterious figure known as Morphaides, Stephanos, now become Monk Petros, would have lost his way. Very few people ever realize how many times Christ allows someone to enter our lives, and how that someone changes our path in a most profound way. These people arrive, they leave, and we barely even notice them. They do not appear as angels of God, but in effect they are. There was such a figure in Metropolitan Petros' life, a man who in an unexpected way, at an unexpected time, saved him from perdition. He talks about it in his memoirs.
Yes, Bishop Petros does write about this incident in his memoirs. This incident being my favorite passage in his memoirs. I guess because I relate to it, because something similar happened to me when I was a young monk. Anyway, he was going back to Chios for the first time since becoming a monk. He had left Chios a few years earlier as Stephanos, went to Ionoros, Mount Athos, became a monk, was tonsured Father Petros, and his spiritual father was sending him back to Chios for some reason. And he was going back to Chios for the first time as a monk. He was full of temptations, thoughts, logismi as we say, were racing through his mind. You're going back to Chios now, forget monasticism, go back to your youthful dream, get your old life back while you're still young, things like this.
But a mysterious figure came into his path, a figure he had known, a figure that I can't find anything about, except all I know about him is what Metropolitan Petros writes in his memoirs. His name was Morphiades, and this is what he writes. I'm going to read right from his memoirs, his very handwriting, and this is the book that Father Pavlos Strategias, Father Paul Strategias, when he interviewed him in 1988. You can see Bishop Petros holding this book, reading from it. Anyway, here's what he says.
It is worth it for me now to refer back to a dream of mine, the dream I had as a child, the one I did not fulfill. Fearing that I would lose my soul, leaving myself from Thessaloniki, I got on a boat to sail to Piraea and then to continue on to Chios. On the ship, I was gripped again by skepticisms, logismi, temptations that were racing through my mind like a cinema film. Everything that I had been through on Mount Athos was passing through my mind. There is still time to drop it all and leave it behind, the wicked spirit was telling me. The opportunity to be a monk was given to you. Now don't go back to that insufferable monastic life. Now is the time for you to fulfill your childhood dream. Amidst these thoughts, the ship dropped anchor in the bay of Chios. I was standing on the deck of the ship, looking at the houses and the stores and reading all the billboards and signs all around the pier. At some point, my heart started beating hard. My whole body was in shock. My eye fell upon some point in the distance. I quickly gathered my luggage and exited the ship and stepped ashore. I ran to the cafe. I stepped through the cafe, walked to the back, and finally I came out through the back door into a courtyard where there was a theatrical scene being prepared. I approached the actor, Morphiades. He was printing some letters on a board about the performance for the evening. I greeted him, but at first he didn't recognize me. So, you don't remember me, Mr. Morph? No, sorry, Father. How could I? Wait a minute. Aren't you Stefane? Stefanos, is that you? And before I could open my mouth to answer, he began to say, Bravo, my child. I commend you on the road you chose to follow. This is how you will live your life and save your soul. Look at us. What a dark life we actors have. Like gypsies, we go from town to finally be taken by the devil. You did well, my son, to not choose our profession. God enlightened you. I squeezed his hand. I thanked him for his advice. And in a few moments, I found myself back on the ship, going back to Ionoros. God had pity on me. He loosened the actor's mouth like he loosened the mouth of Onus of Balaam. And he rescued me from the fulfillment of a dream that would have been my destruction. May God forgive the soul of that man who became the organ of my salvation. Imagine if he was to tell me the reverse. How many times does that happen in our lives? People come in and profoundly affect us and we don't notice it. Bishop Petros noticed it. And he wrote about it here in his memoirs.
Την περασμένη εβδομάδα βρισκόμασταν στο Άγιον Όρος. Εμείνατε εκεί περίπου 9 χρόνια όπως μας είπατε. Πώς ήρθε η στιγμή και με την ευλογία του Θεού αναχωρήσετε από την πνευματική αυτή παλέστρα του Αγίου Όρους και ξεκινήσετε δια την υπηρεσία σας εις τον κόσμο.
Αχ, παιδί μου.
Ah, my son, there was a time when the world was under German occupation. All of Greece was suffering, even the holy mountain, Athos.
Ακόμα και το Άγιο Όρος, βέβαια. Εμείς, και το λέγω εμείς, δεν ήμουν μόνος.
And we, and I say we because I was not alone. My father had come to Mount Athos, and my brother was there also, at the Brotherhood of Holy Ascension at the Skit of St. Anna. But because of the German occupation, and with the whole of Greece suffering from famine, though the Holy Mountain suffered less because the fathers there kept strict rationing,
Διότι είναι αλήθεια ότι πείνα μεγάλη δεν έπεσε στα Άγιο Όρος. Οι πατέρες είχαν εξοικονομήσει τέλος πάντων.
And the Germans permitted only a small amount of grain for an entire year for each monk.
Η Γερμανία έδινε 25 οκάδες περίπου σιτάρι στον κάθε καλόγερο για να περάσει. Όλο το χρόνο.
We thought we might try to improve our conditions.
Ξέρουμε κάποιον τρόπο τέλος πάντων να τα βγάλουμε πέρα. Και παρακάλεσα τον γέροντα να μου δώσει την ευλογία του, μια που ήμουν ζωγράφος.
So I beseeched my elder to give me the blessings to use my artistic talent and go to the city of Ipanomi, which had a large population of old calendarists.
Είναι μια μεγάλη κομμόπολη, τότε είχε 5.000 κατοίκους και είχε περίπου 150 οικογένειες που ακολουθούσαν το παλαιό ορθολόγιο.
With a large church of the Annunciation, where I could paint icons in exchange for grain. So, with the blessings of my elder, Father Nicodemus, I worked as an iconographer and saved the grain I was compensated with, and had planned to give it to the monastery on the holy mountain. A plain monk, by then a great schema monk. Along with my brother and father, I went to Ipanomi to be employed, but unfortunately the Germans did not permit us to transport the grain to Mount Athos, and we had gathered quite a bit by then.
Δεν μας επέτρεψαν, αφού συγκέντρωσα περίπου 300 οκάδες ζάρι από τις εικόνες που ζωγράφησα.
Είχατε σκοπό να επανέλθετε στο Όρος?
Βέβαια. Δεν μας επέτρεψαν οι Γερμανοί να μεταφέρουν.
So we were forced to remain in Ipanomi with the so-called old calendarists, the genuine Orthodox Christians, or GOC as we are now called. These faithful Christians saw in my brother and I the characteristics that they wanted to see in their clergymen. So the faithful of Ipanomi petitioned the hierarchy to ordain us to be their clergymen.
Και έτσι πήγαμε στις Αθήνας, κατόπιν τέλος πάντων αποφάσεως της κοινότητας.
We then had to travel to Athens to be ordained. I was ordained a deacon, and my brother Father Niphon was ordained to the priesthood. After ordination, we returned to Ipanomi to serve the faithful there for as long as God willed it.
Θα ήθελα, αν σας ήταν εύκολο, να μας εκθέσετε ποια ήταν η πρώτη σας εμπειρία ως κληρικός, ως ιεροδιάκονος, την Κυριακή του Πάσχα, την εποχή εκείνη της κατοχής. Κάτι έχει συμβεί με τους Γερμανούς. Σας παρακαλώ, πέστε μας, τι έγινε ακριβώς?
Ναι, αλήθεια.
Indeed, this memory is an emotional one, because in those days our fatherland was under German occupation. The Germans gave strict orders forbidding any midnight church services, and, as we all know, the service of the Holy Resurrection, Pascha, is conducted at midnight. But, due to this command of the Germans, no church in the entire city dared to open its doors to conduct Pascha at midnight. We, or rather me, being a little bit of a fanatic in those days about matters of the faith, I said that I would not take any orders from any Germans or anyone else. All the other churches in the city waited until dawn to conduct their resurrectional Pascha service. Our church, on the other hand, rang our church bells announcing the midnight service, and little by little all the old calendarists came out and lit their paschal candles at midnight according to the ancient and holy tradition. Imagine, if you are able, in those days when we had to cover every single window at night so light would not escape to aid airplanes in aerial bombardment, hundreds of Christians crowded together outside the church, glowing with the light of hundreds of lit candles, with bells ringing, chanting, "Christ is risen." There we were, celebrating Pascha in the traditional ancient way. It wasn't long after we chanted, "Christ is arisen," and rang the bells, that the Germans came and surrounded the church with a Gestapo motorcycle contingent. What can I say? At the moment when we chanted the canon of the Holy Resurrection, or maybe it was the 9th Ode, the angel proclaimed, "Shine, shine," etc., I came out of the altar because the deacon is supposed to cense the church at that moment. And I saw that there were 3 German soldiers standing with their weapons at the candle stand near the entrance of the church. I sensed the entire church and everyone in it, as is proper. But as I approached the Germans, I dared to skip over them without sensing them, and we continued with the liturgy. Now, if you can, put yourself in our position and try to imagine what we were expecting. We were expecting martyrdom. But the next day we learned that the whole town was impressed with our daring. Even the Germans rejoiced at our sincere and deep trust in our faith.
Όταν ομολογείται η Ορθοδοξία χωρίς φόβο, χωρίς να υπάρχει αυτός ο λεγόμενος φόβος των Ιουδαίων, όπως αναφέρεται μέσα στην Αγία Γραφή, όταν ομολογείται η Ορθοδοξία γίνονται θαύματα. Και ένα θαύμα θα μπορούσε να πούμε ήταν και αυτή η παρησία σας κατά τη διάρκεια της κατοχής, που ήταν ένα γερό μάθημα και στους Γερμανούς και στους ολιγοψύχους που τέλος πάντων, βεβαίως λόγω της μεγάλης προσταγής που είχαν δοθεί, της φοβεράς εκείνης προσταγής που δόθηκε από τον...
Ήταν γενική διατροπή.
Βέβαια, ήταν δύσκολη ημέρα και η περίσταση, αλλά δόθηκε μια ομολογία ότι η Ορθοδοξία και στις πιο δύσκολες περιπτώσεις προχωράει μπροστά και δίδει την καλή ομολογία της. Παραμείνετε πόσο καιρό στην επανομή κατά τη διάρκεια της κατοχής?
Στην επανομή παραμείναμε περίπου...
We remained in Ipanomi for 2 years under the fearful conditions we were under. Great pressure, and we suffered tribulations. But due to help from Christ, we came through it victoriously. The Lord was with us. Our faith is a living faith. But it was required that I be ordained to the priesthood to minister to the faithful. Sincerely, I did not want it. I wanted to remain a deacon standing next to my brother with him as a priest. But the faithful insisted due to the shortage of priests. Our original plan was to go back to our homeland of Chios to see our family. And after that, we could have gone back to the Holy Mountain.
Επέμεναν. Ο λαός επέμενε, διότι είχαν ανάγκη από δεύτερον ιερέα, ή μάλλον το σχέδιό μας ήταν να υπάγουμε και στην πατρίδα, να γυρίσουμε πίσω εις στοιχείων.
It is one thing for a man to make plans, and another thing entirely as to what God has planned.
Ανθρώπων, αλλά δε Θεός και Λέβη.
Πώς ακριβώς συνέβη και η χειροτονία σας? Βρισκόμεθα στην διάρκεια της κατοχής, φόβος και τρόμος στην Ελλάδα, οι επίσκοποι του Παλαιού Ημερολογίου βρίσκονται στα Αθήνας. Πώς έγινε η μεταβίβασή σας από την Θεσσαλονίκη, από την επανομή στην Αθήνα? Με τι τρόπο έγινε αυτή η μεταβίβαση?
What can I tell you, my son? I will not dare to tell the whole story because I would lose my credibility. After the previous program was broadcast, a woman viewer called and accused me of making up the whole story about the miracle of the water boiling in front of me at St. Markella's place of martyrdom. If I was to relate all the miracles that I have witnessed in our church and through our traditionalist struggle, no one would believe me, I am afraid.
Υπάρχουν τα πραγματικά θαύματα, υπάρχουν οι πραγματικές επεμβάσεις του Θεού και κάθε μέρα η ζωή του κάθε Ορθοδόξου Χριστιανού είναι ένα πραγματικό θαύμα. Ξέρω πάντως ότι είχατε δυσκολίες με τους Γερμανούς, δεν σας έδιναν άδεια οι Γερμανοί να μεταβιβαστείτε από την Θεσσαλονίκη ή στην Αθήνα. Πώς έγινε η μεταβίβαση σας?
Όταν πήγα να πάρω την άδεια,
in order to make such a trip, it was required that I get a letter of transit. Greece was divided up into sectors of occupation. The Germans had the north, the Italians had the south, etc. When I went to the Gestapo office in Thessaloniki to procure transit papers, the official there rejected my request. He was a Greek, dressed in a German uniform. He was a traitor. He told me, "You're an old calendarist? You're not going anywhere unless you get permission from the new calendar bishop."
Λέω μάλιστα. Δεν μπορεί να πας πουθενά, μου λέγει. Θα μας φέρεις άδεια από τη Μητρόπολη.
So, I returned to Ipanomi. I was a little relieved, though, because I did not want to be ordained. But then I was confronted by another situation. Some spiritual being said to me, "You must go to Athens and be ordained. Do not be of little faith."
Να χειροτονηθείς. Μην ολιγοπιστείς και θα δεις ότι ο Κύριος θα σου αποκαλύψει ότι
that the Lord shall reveal to you along your way that you must become a priest. And that's exactly what happened. I went back to the train yard without any letters of transit. I will never forget, Father, how at the stop for letters of transit documents at Litochoro, it was the middle of the night, and we made the first stop, and the armed soldiers, German soldiers, entered the train to ask everyone for their travel papers.
Ό,τι θέλεις, τρομακτική η παρουσία των. Ναι, για να μας ζητήσουν τα διαβατήρια.
I was terrified. a German shined a light right in my face, but then he immediately moved on to the man sitting right next to me and asked him for documents. I was ignored, but imagine my terror. The train then continued and arrived outside Thiva, and our train was stopped so that a German troop transport could pass. But soon after, we started up again, and our train was derailed by explosives placed on the rails by saboteurs.
Και κατά το μεσονύχτιο ακριβώς επέτρεψε και σε εμάς, διότι τα πρώτα ήταν με στρατιωτικά, επαναλαμβάνω, ενώ το δικό μας ήταν επιβατικό. Λοιπόν, μας επέτρεψαν κατά τα μεσάνυχτα να συνεχίσουμε το δρόμο μας για την Αθήνα και λίγο απ' έξω από το Δαβί, ούτε λίγο ούτε πολύ, είχαν τεθεί βόμβες επάνω στις ράγες, πάνω στα σίδερα της γραμμής και την άχτηκε το...
6 cars in front of our car were crushed into each other. 20 people around me were killed. I was sitting there alive and untouched.
Χωρίς να μου συμβεί τίποτε. Και διεπίστωσα ότι όντως ήταν το θέλημα Θεού να γίνει η χειροτονία μου.
Indeed, it was the Lord's will that I be ordained. I made it to Athens and found the Orthodox Bishop, Germanos Varikopoulos, of blessed memory, who is a great figure in the history of the Church. He was the father confessor of Princess Olga. It was he who ordained me to the priesthood.
Θέλω, πιστεύω ότι θα έχεις διαγνώσει ότι λόγω της ηλικίας μου δεν είμαι πια όπως θα έπρεπε να είμαι τόσο στο γλωσσικό μου σύστημα, στην ευφράβεια του λόγου και στην εξιστόρηση των γεγονότων, διότι είμαι πλέον γέρον. Και λίγη τέλος πάντων αμνησία και ξέρω κι εγώ δεν πιστεύω να είμαι όπως θα έπρεπε να είμαι.
Σας περιμένουμε και στην άλλη μας εκπομπή.
Θα προσπαθήσω, παιδί μου.
In 1952, when Father Petros had just gotten out of jail, he was visited by Bishop Arsenios Saltas, a Greek Orthodox bishop from America who was in Greece trying to recruit priests. Now, Bishop Arsenios Saltas was a somewhat shady character who originally, as an Archimandrite, took advantage of a rift that had developed amongst the Greek population between the conservative-minded royalists and the liberal-minded Venizelos. The Venizelos were anti-monarchy and pro-modernism, and often were supportive of efforts to change the Orthodox Church to fit in with modern society. So Saltas, sensing that by taking leadership of the royalist faction, he would have a shot at prominence in the Orthodox world. Arsenios Saltas was someone who could never become successful in the larger liberal faction, but he knew that by taking charge of the conservative royalist faction, he could establish himself and become promoted. Saltas, taking the leadership of the conservative faction, was able to get Greek Americans to follow him. But unfortunately for him, he wasn't always able to find priests to serve these communities. So he went to Greece in an effort to find priests that he would be able to bring to America to serve his parishes. Father Petros, just having gotten out of jail and being persecuted, was in a mindset that he needed to get out of Greece for a while. It wasn't his intention to leave forever, but he just needed a change of scenery, as it were. And so when Bishop Arsenios came, Bishop Arsenios shrewdly presented himself as an old Calendarist bishop and invited Father Petros to America to serve his parish there. However, what happened was that as soon as Father Petros got to America, he realized that he'd been hoodwinked. Bishop Arsenios greeted him at the airport, and here was a strange situation where a so-called bishop was dressed in plain clothes and a priest was dressed in full monastic garb. And it immediately set a stage of confrontation. Bishop Arsenios could not tolerate Father Petros' conservatism, because after all, he was not really a conservative person, but merely was presenting himself as a conservative to have a support base. Whereas Father Petros was through and through, in his heart, a traditional-minded person and a traditional-minded priest.
I had been preparing for my trip since the spring of 1952, when Arsenios Saltas invited me to America. It was on July 11th of the old calendar, 1952, that my airplane touched down in New York City. When I disembarked from the plane, I looked into the crowd of people waiting for their loved ones. I was seeking Bishop Arsenios, but he was nowhere in sight. Suddenly, he was next to me. For a moment I felt as if I was still in the airplane and it had crashed into the earth. Arsenios. He wasn't wearing his habit. This gentleman with a blue blazer, dark purple shirt, and a thatched straw hat was the Archbishop of the genuine Greek Orthodox Church of America? I bowed to kiss his hand, but he did not permit me. And he did well, because what would onlookers think, seeing a robed Archimandrite kissing the hand of an apparent layman? My first assignment in America was to be the priest at Bishop Arsenios' church of St. John the Baptist on 17th Street. Near the church, I enrolled in a night class to learn English. I anxiously awaited the arrival to America of my friend and co-struggler in our cause in Greece, Father Ephraim Karagiannis. I had asked him to come from Greece and help our cause here. We were brothers in monasticism on the Holy Mountain, and I revered him very much. I lasted less than 8 months with Bishop Arsenios. His modernist ways, his modernist priests, and his usage of the new calendar in many of his churches was not what I signed up for. When I questioned him about this, he responded, "Listen to me, my son. Do not bring your rascally ways here. This is America." I was distraught. Why had I suffered imprisonment and depredations for holy tradition in Greece, only to come here, to America, the land of freedom, to betray my faith? No way. It would be better to go back to Greece and suffer. I left the Bishop Arsenios and his church and found an apartment and supported myself with my iconography. I began saving for my ticket back to Greece. When Father Ephraim finally arrived in America, he took my place at the church. Father Ephraim, the zealot, the ascetic of Mount Athos, changed his course. He became an American. He stayed close to Bishop Arsenios. When the bishop died, Father Ephraim went under the ecumenist new calendarist Archbishop Iakovos. He shaved his beard off and put on a suit and a Latin priest collar. His betrayal of the struggle caused me great disappointment. I was heartbroken. During this time, I attended divine services at the Tsarist Russian Cathedral at 93rd Street, where I became friends with the saintly Metropolitan Anastasia. It took me many months to earn enough to purchase airfare back to Greece, but by early 1954, I had saved enough and packed my bags to leave. I went to visit the Bidiala family, who had supported me in America, to bid them farewell, but they would have none of it. They insisted I remain in America to minister to the Greek Orthodox faithful who were struggling like them to preserve holy tradition. They loaned me $2,000 to put a down payment on a small house in Astoria, New York. I succumbed to their petitions. On July 22nd, 1954, the feast day of St. Markella, the Virgin Martyr of Chios, I celebrated the very first Divine Liturgy in the little house chapel on 26th Street. It became a beacon and a light tower of our struggle in America.
μας τρομάζουν φύλακες, πείνα δαρνιστερήσεις, δε μας φοβίζουν διωγμοί και μυριάλες θλίψεις. Είμεθα όλοι έτοιμοι να γίνουμε θυσία, το αίμα μας να χύσουμε για την Ορθοδοξία. Το αίμα μας να χύσουμε για την Ορθοδοξία.
On April 24th, 1926, the Holy Synod of the State Church of Greece issued a very harsh encyclical directed against traditional Orthodox Christians, also known as the Old Calendarists. The encyclical states, "The Old Calendarists separate themselves from the Church and cut themselves off from the body of Christ, drawing upon themselves condemnation and excommunication." In 1951, after a short respite, a new and more intense and far more sustained persecution by the state-controlled New Calendar Church broke out against the traditionalist, genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece. The spiritual leader of the traditionalist Christians, the saintly 81-year-old Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Florina, was arrested and exiled for 15 months in a remote monastery on the island of Mytilene. During the course of his exile, his former deacon and, by now patriarch, Athinagoras, proposed to him that he join the New Calendarist Church and be released from his imprisonment and abandon his holy struggle and his principles. In his letter to the saint, the patriarch pointed out that all other Old Calendarist bishops of the Traditionalist Church had abandoned their struggle and had joined the New Calendar Church, and that he, Chrysostomos, was the only bishop left fighting for what was now a lost cause. In a letter penned from his exile, Saint Chrysostomos responded to his former deacon.
Even if, hypothetically, every old calendarist returned to the new calendar, and there remained only one old calendarist, that one would be me, Chrysostomos, the former Metropolitan of Florina. Athens, April 10th, 1953. To the Ladies' Association of the Holy Sepulchre of St. John the Baptist Church in New York. In my desire for your salvation and well-being, I shout the words that are the joy of all creation. Christ is arisen. I received your letter dated April 4th, 1953, which I read with great interest. I thank you for the sympathy that you are manifesting to those of us who are suffering due to our struggle to preserve and uphold the holy traditions of our forebears. Those who wield power in this age and who persecute us do not consider the final and righteous judgment of our Lord, who will recompense everyone according to their works. How is it that in these times in which we live, wherein is heard a constant caterwaul of support for human rights and freedom, we are experiencing religious persecution? It can only be but to serve to fulfill the Lord's words to his holy apostles. In this life you will suffer. And to confirm the words of the Apostle Paul, all those who want to live piously in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. This is why our tormentors act as they do. But we are filled with a calming peace when we hear the words of the Apostle Petros, who says, if you suffer, it should not be as a murderer or a thief or any other kind of criminal, or even as a meddler. However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. We are not ashamed, but we glorify God who allows suffering for the benefit of his entire creation. We were gladdened when informed by your letter that the priest we sent you, Father Petros Astofides, has been found worthy of his mission and our hopes. We pray for the continuance of his good work, not so his pride will increase, but so that you, his spiritual children, will benefit from his success. We fervently thank you for the economic help that you sent us to support our holy struggle. May the Lord generously grant you recompense in this life and in the next for your loving generosity. In closing, we bestow upon you our paternal blessings. Chrysostomos, the former Metropolitan of Florina, President of the Holy Synod of the Church of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece.
How did Bishop Petros meet the Russian bishops? That had to be December 25th, 1954, when Bishop Petros met Archbishop Averki of Syracuse and Archbishop Leonti of Chile in Grand Central Station. December 25th, 1954, had to be that day, most likely on that day, the day most New Yorkers were celebrating Christmas. On this day, in 1954, December 25th or December 12th, depending on how which calendar you're following, Father Petros was on his way to visit the Pirialas family in Cortland, New York. He had to catch the train. He took the train from Astoria to Grand Central, the subway to Grand Central, and from Grand Central, he was catching the New York Central line. Now, when he entered the Great Hall, Father Petros noticed two other clergymen dressed in the traditional Orthodox Christian manner that priests usually dressed in. And he approached them, and through broken English, the three clergymen, they established that they were all celebrating the feast of St. Spiridon. And they were all headed to catch the same train on the New York Central line, the Hudson line of the New York Central line. And Father Petros was getting off at Cortland, where the Pedialis family lived and whom he was going to visit. And the other two clergymen were actually the Russian hierarchs, Archbishop Averki of Syracuse and Archbishop Leonti of Chile. And they were taking the same train to Herkimer, which was near their destination of Holy Trinity Monastery. Now, on this hour-long train ride to Cortland, it gave these men a chance to realize that they were of one mind regarding holy tradition, ecumenism, and all the modernist innovations and trends that were infecting the Orthodox Church at that time, and still are. So they became close friends for the rest of their lives. 8 years after this train ride, Archbishop Leonti would ordain Bishop Petros to the episcopacy in the Cathedral of St. Markella, and they remained friends for the rest of their lives.
By the end of 1955, the last of the traditionalist Greek Orthodox bishops who adhered to holy tradition and to the Julian Old Calendar had died. Traditionalist Old Calendarist Greek Orthodox Christians were now without bishops who could minister to them. Recognizing this as a completely uncanonical situation in which to be, they formed a committee of 12 clergymen to govern the church, and they began a search for someone to ordain bishops for them. Since Father Petros had been compelled to stay in America to establish the parish of St. Markella in Astoria, he joined the jurisdiction of the Russian Metropolia, now known as the Orthodox Church of America. Metropolitan Leonti Turkovich made him the dean of the Greek churches that came into the Metropolia with Father Petros, and he awarded him the honor of wearing a mitre. Even though Metropolitan Leonti honored Father Petros by elevating him to the rank of mitred priest, he was not willing to ordain him, or any other Greek, as a bishop for traditionalist Greek Americans. Such a move would be viewed by the modernist New Calendarist Greek American Church as the creation of a rival jurisdiction. The traditionalist Greeks were still without a bishop who spoke their language. During this period, when he was rebuffed by the Metropolia, Father Petros came into contact with clergymen of another Orthodox church that was headquartered in New York City, the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, known as Rokor. Rokor was seen by the traditionalist Old Calendar Greeks as a synod in resistance to modernism and ecumenism, much in the same way as they themselves were. But despite the increasing tension between Rokor and the New Calendarists over the issue of ecumenism and the calendar change, the chief hierarch of Rokor, Metropolitan Anastasi, was also opposed to creating a rival to a sister Orthodox church. The Council of 12 Clergymen wrote several letters to Metropolitan Anastasi requesting that the Rokor consecrate bishops for their church, but the answer was always in the negative. However, there were two Rokor bishops, Theophil of Detroit and Seraphim of Chicago, who were willing to help the Greek Old Calendarists, but only in complete secrecy. That is why, on December 9th, 1960, a clandestine ordination took place in, of all places, the north side of Detroit, Michigan.
I'm standing right here near Ground Zero, where on September 11th, 2001, that horrible day, the Twin Towers that once stood here where the the Freedom Tower now stands. Between the Königsphere here and the Freedom Tower is where the Twin Towers stood. They were twice as thick as the Freedom Tower, and there were two of them. And they collapsed on that day when we were attacked. And when they collapsed, they fell right on St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, which was right here. We're gonna go down exactly where the church stood, and we'll explain what happened in that church in 1956. This is what St. Nicholas Church looked like right after the first plane hit the South Tower. And this is what St. Nicholas Church looked like in the 1980s. This is what the spot where St. Nicholas stood looks like today. This composition book from that day has the names of the priests who were present for the occasion that took place here, the 16th of February, 1956. What happened was, at that point in the history of the Old Calendar Church, of the Old Calendar Greek Orthodox Church, there were no more bishops left. Saint Chrysosimos, the new confessor of Florina, died in September of 1955. A few months later, in December of 1955, Arsenios Saltas, whose cathedral this was. St. Nicholas was a Greek Orthodox Old Calendar cathedral. Now, Arsenios Saltas was not much of a traditionalist. He wasn't really in his heart an Old Calendarist. Bishop Petros recognized that he was just an opportunist. Bishop Petros came to America at Arsenios' invitation, but Bishop Petros, or at that time Archimandrite Petros, lasted about 8 months with him. And then he went off and lived on his own for a while, saving money so he could go back to Greece. He did iconography. He lived up on Broadway in the Sugar Hill neighborhood of Manhattan, which was a Russian ethnic neighborhood at the time. He lived there for a while until he was ready to go back to Greece in the early part of 1954. He saved up enough money. He was about to go back to Greece, and the Pirialas family kept him here. Pirialas has told him, no, don't go back to Greece. We need you here. We'll give you money to put a down payment for a little house in Astoria, and that became the Cathedral of St. Markella. So from 1954, Bishop Petros was liturgizing in Astoria at St. Markella's Cathedral. Less than 2 years later, he comes down here with all the other priests that were a part of the Old Calendar movement in America, some 11 of them. There they are, they're their names. Some 11, even Father Michael Karloutsos. Father Michael Karloutsos' 2 sons are priests in the New Calendar Greek Orthodox Church in America, prominent priests. Anyway, Father Michael Karloutsos voted for what they voted for that day. And what were they here? What were they doing? They decided that they needed a bishop. The Greek Orthodox Church, the Old Calendar, genuine traditionalist church in America, needed bishops. They needed bishops in Greece too. And they decided they're going to deal with it here in America in their way by nominating a worthy candidate that they would present to a traditionalist Russian bishop so that they could have their selection ordained to the episcopacy, and this new bishop would minister to the Greek-speaking traditionalist Orthodox Christians of America. So these 10 priests got together right here on that day, and they elected or nominated Petros Astifides, Archimandrite Petros Astifides. So they took that nomination and they went to the Metropolitan Leonti Turkovic of the Metropolia. At the time it was called the Metropolia, now it's the OCA, and asked him to please take this worthy candidate and ordain him to the episcopacy so we have a Greek-speaking bishop for our people. There were quite a few Greek-speaking Old Calendarists at the time, and there still are. They were in Massachusetts, here in New York, New Jersey, Brooklyn, Detroit, Chicago. So Metropolitan Leonti refused. He refused because he was in communion he was in communion with the Archdiocese of North and South America, the New Calendar Greek Church, the Ecumenist, Modernist Church. He was in communion with the Church in Greece. He did not want to disrupt these relations. He wasn't ready to do that yet. So the Greek Old Calendarist, laity and priests had no bishop until 1960, when Rocor secretly, 2 bishops in Rocor, secretly ordained Akakios Papas, Archimandrite Akakios Papas. He came from Greece, and in 1960, he was ordained in Detroit.
We're on 8 Mile in John R. In Detroit, and we're standing at the old St. Nicholas Church, Romanian Orthodox Church, which is where Archbishop Akakios Papas was consecrated bishop in 1960 by Archbishop Seraphim of Chicago and the Romanian Bishop Theophil Ionescu, Bishop of Severus. We see the church behind us. There's some remnants of the old Romanian Orthodox architecture. There's a little bell tower or cupola on top. St. Nicholas, Romanian Orthodox Church, was established in 1955 by dissidents who escaped from Romania, anti-communist dissidents. And many of them had fought in World War II against the Soviets. Others were conscientious objectors, and they had been imprisoned or they had been targeted by the secret police in Romania. And when they came to the United States, they found that many of the Romanian churches in the United States had been infiltrated by the secret police. And so various parishes broke with the Patriarchate of Romania and established a Romanian language episcopate, initially under ROCOR, under the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. St. Nicholas is one of those churches. Here we're looking at the cross that was placed here by the Romanian Orthodox Christians that established St. Nicholas Church in 1955. This was their fellowship hall. Next door is their house right here, is their rectory. Here is the church. It was a very large community that was here between 1955 and 1987. And on December 19th, 1960, when the church was under the jurisdiction of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, Archbishop Seraphim of Chicago and Bishop Theophil Ionescu of Sevres ordained Archbishop Akakios Papas to the episcopate. In 1955, Metropolitan Chrysostomos of Florina had reposed Saint Chrysostomos, and he had not left the successors. And so a number of bishops in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia agreed to assist in the restoration of the episcopate of our church.
Now, was this a canonical, uncanonical, valid, invalid consecration?
Well, under normal circumstances, it would have been highly irregular. But the circumstance of course, the calendar innovation and ecumenism are circumstances, mitigating circumstances, really, that justify the action. In that the bishops in Greece, the new calendar bishops in Greece, had they had compromised themselves by accepting an innovation, which was the first step in the implementation of modern ecumenism. So behind this wall is where the sanctuary of St. Nicholas Church was, and in the sanctuary was the altar at which Archbishop Akakios Papas was ordained, where the apostolic succession of the Greek Orthodox Church was restored in Detroit, not in Greece. The canonicity of this act, given the circumstances, and given its recognition later by St. Philaret and the Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, is unassailable.
Where would the Holy Table have been? Probably right up there.
Well, this is the east end of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the site of the sanctuary of the church, where the ordinations The ordination of Archbishop Akakios would have been right in here. You could kind of see the outline of the solea right here.
When Metropolitan Anastasi learned that Archbishop Seraphim of Chicago had secretly ordained Akakios Papas, he let it become known that he was not happy. There are some witnesses who testify that Seraphim was in fact suspended for 6 months. Irregardless of this, there were other bishops in the Russian Church who decided to proceed with further ordinations of bishops for the Greek Church. They did this at great risk to their reputations and their futures in the Russian Church. In 1961, Archbishop Leonte of Chile traveled to Greece and together with Bishop Akakios Papas, he proceeded to ordain 6 bishops for the genuine Orthodox Church of Greece. When he returned to America, he, together with Bishop Seraphim of Caracas, secretly ordained Petros Astifidis to the rank of bishop. This ordination took place in the Church of St. Markella on November 29th, 1962.
Ο γέροντάς μου ο Πέτρος ο Αστιφίδης χειροτονήθηκε εδώ στην Αγία Μαρκέλα στην Αστόρια το 1962 από τους αρχιερείς Λεόντιο από τη Χιλή και από τη Βενεζουέλα Καράκας Σεραφείμ 29 Νοεμβρίου με το Ορθόδοξο Ορτολόγιο. Εκείνη την ημέρα είναι παραμόνη και φιλουμένη ορθάζει η Εκκλησία μας αυτούς τους Αγίους. Ήταν απόφαση των Αγίων Αρχιερέων να τον βάλουν τον γέροντά μου στο Καράκας να το χειροτονήσουν, γιατί ήταν εμέρη διωγμός και δεν ήθελαν εδώ πολύ ανοιχτά να το χειροτονήσουν. Και μου είπαν ο σεβασμιότατος Λεόντιος, Νικοδήμη, είσαι satisfied, ευχαριστημένος που θα πάρουμε το γέροντά σου στο Καράκας να το χειροτονήσουμε? Του είπα, I say no. Του είπα όχι. Γιατί? Because δεν θα είμαι στη χειροτονία του στο Καράκας. Και πήγε και συνοννοήθηκε με τον άλλον αρχιερέα, τον σεβασμιότατο Σεραφείμ, και έρχεται σε λίγο και μου λέει Σέμι, Νικοδήμ, good news, θα το χειροτονήσουμε αύριο στην Αγία Μαρκέλα. Και τότε εγώ πολύ χάρηκα. Και έτσι ετοιμάσαμε εκείνο το βράδυ, ήταν Τρίτη εσπέρας προς Τετάρτη πρωί και κάναμε αγρυπνία και χειροτώνησαν οι 2 αρχιερείς, το γέροντά μου τον Πέτρο αρχιερέα. Είμαστε εγώ και η γερόντισσα συγκλητική και 2-3 άλλα άτομα, γιατί ήταν μυστική χειροτονία λόγω του διωγμού που είχε η Εκκλησία μας. Ήταν μερικοί άνθρωποι της Εκκλησίας μας. Μία ήταν και η γερόντισσα Θεοκτίστη που γίνει και μετά μοναχή. Ήταν λαϊκή ακόμα τότε. Και εκείνη μαγείρευσε. I was deacon that time. 2 χρόνια ήμουν διάκονος και έτσι ήμουν στη χειροτονία του γέροντά μου. Μαζί ήταν και ο νυν σεβασμιότατος Ακάκιος από το Μοντρεάλ. Τότε μόλις τον είχαμε χειροτονήσει διάκονο και ιερέα πριν 2 εβδομάδες. Εκείνη η χειροτονία θα μου μείνει αλυσμόνητη. Από τότε δεν έχω παρακολουθήσει η χειροτονία αρχιερέως.
Θυμάμαι ότι είχαμε πάρα πολύ μεγάλο πρόβλημα με τη χειροτονία του. Ο δεσπότης ο Λεόντιος μία μέρα μπροστά μου και μπροστά σε άλλους έκανε τηλέφωνο στην Αθήνα για να μιλήσει στους αρχιερείς ότι θα χειροτονήσει τον γέροντα τον Πέτρο. Στο τηλέφωνο ήταν ο Χρυσόστομος Νασλήμης της Μαγνησίας και από το τηλέφωνο φώναξε δυνατά «Νιέτ Πέτρος». Ο γέροντας ο Πέτρος το άκουσε ότι αυτός αντιδρούσε και δεν ήθελε να χειροτονηθεί ο γέροντας ο Πέτρος δεσπότης και ησύχασε. 1-2 μέρες μετά, δεν μπορώ να σας πω πόσο, θυμάμαι, λέει «Βρε παιδιά, ξύπνησα και είδα ένα πάρα πολύ παράξενο όνειρο». Κάποιος με χτύπησε στην πλάτη και μου είπε Σεραφιμάκι. Άκουσα το όνειρό του εγώ και μου φάνηκε λιγάκι αστείο. Λέω τι όνειρο είναι. Όμως δεν ήταν όνειρο, ήταν αποκάλυψη. Κάποιος άγγελος Κυρίου, ο Θεός γνωρίζει ποιον είχε στείλει ο Κύριος για να τον προετοιμάσει για τη χειροτονία. Υπήρχαν 2 Σεραφείμ στην Ρωσική Εκκλησία. Ο Σεραφείμ ο γυραιός, ο οποίος ήταν στο Σικάγο και ο οποίος δεν ήθελε πουδενή λόγο να χειροτονηθεί ο γέροντας αρχιερεύς, και ο Σεραφείμ ο μικρός που ήταν από την Βενεζουέλα και γι' αυτό στο όνειρό του άκουσε Σεραφείμ, Σεραφείμ, Σεραφιμάκι. Τελικά ο δεσπότης ο Λεόντιος κανόνισε τη χειροτονία μαζί με τον Σεραφείμ που έτυχε να είναι εδώ στη Νέα Υόρκη και είχαν αποφασίσει να χειροτονηθεί σε μία αγρυπνία που κάναμε του Αγίου Παραμόνου και Φιλουμένου. Ο Λεόντιος δεν ήθελε να υπάρχουν πολλοί άνθρωποι για να βρίσκονται, γιατί δεν ήθελε να γίνει η χειροτονία μυστική. Φυσικά ο δεσπότης ο Πέτρος, Αρχιμανδρίτης τότε βέβαια, του είπε ότι θα γίνει η επιθυμία του και δεν κάλεσε κανέναν. Εμείς είμαστε μόνο 3 γυναίκες. Ήταν η αδελφή Φιλοθέη, η οποία είχε γίνει δροσοφόρα μοναχή και έχει τώρα πεθάνει, μια νεοκόρισσα που την είχε για χρόνια γέροντας, την κυρία Κούλα Λιβάνη, και τον εαυτό μου. Φυσικά θέλαμε κι εμείς να δούμε τη χειροτονία. Τότε η εκκλησία ήταν πολύ μικρή, χωρισμένη στα δυο. Στο ένα μέρος, στο πολύ βορεινό, ήταν η καθεαυτού εκκλησία. Μετά υπήρχε ένας μεγάλος διαχωρισμός με χοντρές κουρτίνες, τις οποίες τις είχαμε κατεβάσει, τις είχαμε κλείσει, και στο επόμενο μέρος ήταν η πρώτη μεγάλη αίθουσα μπαίνοντας μέσα στην εκκλησία. Εκεί πέρα ήταν το καταφύγιό μας τη νύχτα για να τραβάμε λίγο την κουρτίνα και για να βλέπουμε τη χειροτονία. Θυμάμαι είχαν βάλει καρέκλες εκτός του ιερού και μου φάνηκε αυτό βέβαια πολύ παράξενο γιατί δεν το είχα ξαναδεί. Είδα τους αρχιερείς και επίσης τον πατέρα Νικόδημο, τον πατέρα Ακάκιο από το Ακάκιο, από το Montreal και τον πατέρα Ελευθέριο Μόσχο που τώρα βρίσκεται μοναχός στο Άγιον Όρος. Εμείς παρακολουθήσαμε τη χειροτονία, σας είπα, τραβώντας την κουρτίνα. Όταν τελείωσε η χειροτονία, βέβαια εμείς είχαμε εξαφανιστεί, δεν θυμάμαι λεπτομέρειες πώς τους είχα ετοιμάσει το πρωινό, δεν θυμάμαι καθόλου. Θυμάμαι όμως ότι είχαμε κλείσει πάλι τις κουρτίνες και στο πρώτο μέρος είχαμε στρώσει εμείς οι 3 για να μπορέσουμε να ξεκουραστούμε και για να μην μας δούνε κιόλας οι αρχιερείς. Αυτά θυμάμαι για τη χειροτονία του. Τίποτε άλλο.
Metropolitan Anastasi and the Holy Synod of Rokor did not recognize the ordinations of Akakios or of Petros, or any of the secret ordinations of Greek bishops. They were seen as wholly uncanonical and were publicly and officially disowned by the Rokor. However, in private, there was a completely different opinion that was held by a great portion of the members of the Russian Synod. St. John of San Francisco and 7 other Russian bishops, counting Seraphim of Chicago, Leonti of Chile, Averki of Syracuse, Seraphim of Caracas, Nectari of Seattle, Savas of Edmonton, and Anthony of Melbourne considered them to be truly valid bishops. Among all the letters and documents in the archives of the Cathedral of St. Markella, there are 2 letters that shed some light on this. One letter is a note from 5 Russian bishops thanking Bishop Petros for his hospitality in hosting them at the Cathedral of St. Markella. These bishops came to visit Bishop Petros on the feast day of St. Markella, the Virgin Martyr of Chios. This letter is dated less than a year after Petros was ordained to the episcopacy. In the letter, they address him as their brother hierarch. One of the photographs from that very day was taken down this alley on Crescent Street behind the cathedral. A second letter that is kept in the archives in Astoria is from St. John Maximovich, the Archbishop of San Francisco. It is addressed to Bishop Petros. It is dated May 16th, 1964. In the letter, St. John uses Greek to inform his Greek friend that the Russian Synod has elected a new first hierarch, and that hierarch is Metropolitan Philaret of New York. In 1969, a mere 5 years after this letter was sent, every bishop of the Russian Synod of Rokor and their chief hierarch, Saint Philaret, the Metropolitan of New York, accepted all the secret ordinations of the Greek bishops conducted by Archbishop Seraphim of Chicago, Archbishop Leonti of Chile, and Bishop Seraphim of Caracas as valid, and the Greek Church was officially recognized as a sister church in full Eucharistic communion with Rokor. In 1974, during the period when the Church of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece was in full Eucharistic communion with the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, the Russian Synod was also in full Eucharistic communion with another Greek Old Calendarist group of bishops known as the Matthewite Synod. But the Matthewite Synod was not in communion with the Church of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece. Saint Philaret of New York, the chief hierarch of Rokor, fervently sought to have the two traditionalist Greek synods that were united with his Russian synod establish unity with each other. But the Matthewites' main concern was that the Church of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece did not consistently deny the grace of the new Calendarist Church of Greece. To the Matthewites, this indicated that the Greek Orthodox Church was not truly against ecumenism and not fully orthodox in its confession. Therefore, in order to facilitate union with the Matthewites and put any doubts of their anti-ecumenist confession to rest, the Holy Synod of the Church of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece clarified its position in an encyclical published in early 1974 that was titled, "Thus do we believe, thus do we speak." In this encyclical, the Holy Synod of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece expressed their definitive position that the new Calendarist Church was devoid of grace. Bishop Petros refused to sign the encyclical on the advice of Saint Philaret and the Synod of Rokor. But because of his refusal, the Holy Synod of the genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece removed Petros from the Holy Synod on June 5th, 1974.
Well, the 1974 encyclical was an attempt to come to terms with the Matthewites. In 1971, the Matthewites had gone to Rokor to have the ordinations regularized. And when the two representatives of the Matthewites returned to Greece, the whole restoration of union broke down. The whole project of reunification broke down. In 1974, just like in 1950, the Florentine Synod made a serious attempt to come to terms with the Matthewites, to convince them that there's nothing to fear in joining the Florentine Synod or uniting with the Florentine Synod. Metropolitan Petros, who was in the United States and had been ordained by Rokor in the United States, of course asked what he should do, and he was given the answer not to sign. The particular statement in the 1974 encyclical, which states that the New Calendar Church does not have any grace. And for Metropolitan Petros, this was less a theological question than it was a pastoral question, because the question of no grace in the New Calendar Church immediately implies multiple impediments or multiple roadblocks that, let's say, a New Calendarist Orthodox Christian has to overcome in order to join our church, including, most importantly, chrismation. And so Metropolitan Petros, I think, was of the school of thought that we should reduce the number of requirements And the statement that there is no grace in the New Calendar Church creates more requirements. Well, it's a very difficult position that Metropolitan Petros is in, because on the one hand, he's been instructed by Rokor, after asking him the specific question about the question of grace, not to sign the encyclical. On the other hand, the encyclical is part of a project that Rokor has a stake in, or at least feels St. Philip feels very strongly about, which is, again, the reunification of the Greek Church. Simultaneously, internally, the Greek Church is in disarray because of the policies of Archbishop Avxentios, who by this time had been receiving almost routinely priests from the New Calendar Church that were not worthy of the calling. And around the same time, shortly after the promulgation of the encyclical of 1974, there was a movement in Greece among a group of bishops to cease participating in the synod meetings in protest to Archbishop Avxentios' carelessness in admitting these, in accepting these priests. Among them is the future Archbishop Chrysostomos Kiousis, who at the time was Metropolitan of Thessaloniki. And so it's a very difficult position for Metropolitan Petros, both in his relationship with the Russian Church, but also based on his knowledge of affairs in the Greek Church. And finally, because of his pastorship, because of his pastoral mission in Astoria, New York, which was to bring the Greek Orthodox immigrants of Astoria in particular, and more broadly in the United States and Canada, to the faith of the fathers, to bring them back to the knowledge of their faith and to bring them into the Church of the Patristic Calendar. Metropolitan Petros was in an impossible situation indeed, because the synod that ordained him had instructed him not to sign the document that his home synod was requiring him to sign. Anyone in that situation would be perplexed as to what to do.
I was ordained by the most holy bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. My ordination was recognized by the Russian Synod. From a canonical aspect, I should have belonged to the Russian Synod from the time of my ordination, but my heart was set on helping the struggling anti-ecumenist, anti-modernist, old calendarist Church of Greece, which is truly suffering greatly from the enemies of the faith. However, I always enjoyed and desired to have communion with my maternal Russian Synod. My communion with the Synod of Greece has been severed. The Russian Holy Synod of Bishops has also severed communion with me, ironically enough, because I obey and follow its own decrees, and I will not sign something the Russian Synod itself condemns. As for my future canonical position, that, I think, should be in accordance with the holy canons of the Church. In the words of St. Ignatius the God-bearer, where there is unity, there also is Jesus Christ. It is therefore my conviction that the only canonical thing for me and my clergymen to do is to ask my brother bishops to accept me into the Holy Council of Bishops of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia as a full member under the Synod's jurisdiction. Presently, we commemorate Metropolitan Philaret's name during the proskomidi, but we dearly want to commemorate his name during all services in all churches. I consider the Russian Synod as an oasis of orthodoxy in the desert of ecumenism and heresy. And it is for this reason that it is my fondest wish to have ecclesiastical union with you.
So Metropolitan Petros was isolated. He didn't want to sign the document, and his home synod had basically erased his name from the list of bishops. He wanted to be in full communion and part of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, a member of that synod and the hierarchy of bishops. And yet, the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia refused to admit him, to commune with him, to concelebrate with him, because they took a very strict stand on the question of ecclesiastical order. They saw themselves, if they would admit Metropolitan Petros in the communion, as harboring a renegade. And we have to put that in the context of St. Philaret's efforts in the late 60s and early 70s, again, to restore the unity of the Greek Church. And so admitting Metropolitan Petros like that as a renegade would have militated against that entire project and the entire vision of the united front against the ecumenists. We should view Metropolitan Petros' policy as part of the early history of the question of the communion of New Calendarists. Because anyone that knows the community of St. Markella's knows that he was a strict confessor, that he confessed people as a spiritual father. In hindsight, though, I think we have to see the whole question in conjunction with the development of ecumenism. As ecumenism gets worse, the answer to the question of how the New Calendarists should be received becomes much clearer. And so in 2018, it's much easier for us to say, of course, they need to be received as someone coming from outside of the church.
Υγεία ψυχής και σώματος σας εύχομαι σε όλους να χαίρεστε. Κοντά στο Χριστό μας όλοι να είμαστε και να αξιωθούμε να δούμε ελευθέρα την Κύπρο μας και όλα τα έθνη τα οποία μας κατέχουν οι βάρβαροι εχθροί της Ορθοδοξίας και του Ελληνισμού. Και του χρόνου και καλή Ανάσταση σας εύχομαι.
In 1978, in a letter to Metropolitan Petros of Astoria, Metropolitan Philaret and the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia rejected his request to enter into ecclesiastical communion. But in 1985, he was finally accepted back into the Holy Synod of the genuine Orthodox Church of Greece. It would take until 1994, 20 years after his removal from the Synod and a few short years before his death, for Metropolitan Petros to finally re-establish ecclesiastical communion with the Russian Church. In fact, 1 year before he reposed on January 9th, 1997, he celebrated a divine liturgy at the Russian monastery of the Holy Trinity in Jordanville, New York. At the time of his death, he was a full member of the Holy Synod of the genuine Orthodox Church of Greece, and was once again in full communion with his beloved Russian Church.
Η Εκκλησία μας, η ταπεινή μας αυτή η Ιερά Μητρόπολη της Αγίας Μαρκέλης, για χρόνια ολόκληρα προσφέρει εις την ομογένεια μία αρκετά μεγάλη υπηρεσία. Μιμούμενοι και εμείς τους πατέρες της τουρκοκρατίας ιδρύσαμε ένα κρυφό σχολείο πριν από 30 και πλέον χρόνια. Μέσα σε αυτό το σχολείο Μέσα σε αυτό το σχολείο της Αγίας Μαρκέλης εφοίτησαν αρκετοί μαθητές, Ελληνόπαιδες της Αμερικής, παιδιά γεννημένα εδώ στην Αμερική που εξέμαθαν την ελληνική γλώσσα, μαθαίνοντας την αθάνατη γλώσσα της πατρίδος μας και την θρησκεία μας από τις γερόντισσες αδελφές, οι οποίες ακριβώς όχι μόνο θυσίασαν τη ζωή τους για την αγάπη του Ναζωραίου, αλλά και επίσης προσέφεραν, όπως σας είπα και στην αρχή, τις υπηρεσίες τους εις την ελληνική ομογένεια της Αμερικής. Κοντά μας απόψε λοιπόν έχουμε τη γερόντισσα συγκλητική μαζί με τη συνοδεία της. Καταρχήν, πριν προχωρήσουμε, θα ήθελα και εγώ να πω ότι ένας από τους μαθητές του ελληνικού σχολείου της Αγίας Μαρκέλης υπήρξα και εγώ πριν από 30 χρόνια και δασκάλα μου ήταν η αδελφή συγκλητική, η οποία μετά από τόσα χρόνια τώρα πλέον, αντί να με έχει μαθητή της, πλέον έχω γίνει πρεσβύτερος της Εκκλησίας και εξυπηρετώ την Εκκλησία. Και τα πρώτα μου βήματα τα ξεκίνησα μέσα από αυτό το ελληνικό σχολείο της Αγίας Μαρκέλης. Πόσα χρόνια βρίσκεστε εδώ στην Αμερική?
30.
Και από πού ξεκινήσατε?
Ξεκινήσαμε από τον Άγιο Μινά, από το μοναστήρι μας στον Άγιο Μινά, και ο γεροντάς μας έστειλε εδώ για να ενισχύσουμε, να βοηθήσουμε το σχολείο της Αγίας Μαρκέλας, το οποίο είχε αρχίσει πριν 4 χρόνια περίπου, από τον καιρό που είχαμε έρθει εμείς εδώ.
Μαζί σας ήρθε και η γερόντισσα Διονυσία?
Λίγο αργότερα ήρθε η αδελφή Διονυσία εδώ.
Και στη συνέχεια
και στη συνέχεια ήρθε η αδελφή Μυροφόρα από την Ελλάδα και οι υπόλοιπες αδελφές έχουν έρθει εδώ από διάφορα μέρη της Αμερικής και του Καναδά. Προσπαθήσαμε με κάθε τρόπο να μάθουμε τα παιδιά όσο δυνατόν την θρησκεία μας, να τους μιλήσουμε για την πατρίδα μας, να μάθουν τη γλώσσα μας, να μπορούν να μιλούν, να διαβάζουν και να γράφουν κατά κάποιο τρόπο ελληνικά και να ξυπνήσουμε μέσα τους το πατριωτισμό που σαν Ελληνόπαιδα και αυτά βρίσκονται τόσο μακριά από την αγαπημένη μας πατρίδα, να νιώσουν και αυτά ότι είναι ένα κομμάτι του ελληνικού λαού που βρίσκεται τόσο μακριά μας από εδώ στην Αμερική. Πιστεύω ότι κάπως το έχουμε κατορθώσει αυτό και με πολύ χαρά βλέπουμε παιδιά που έχουμε να τα δούμε 30 χρόνια ή λιγότερο, ξέρω εγώ, να έρχονται να μας αγκαλιάζουν και να μας φέρουν ακόμα και τα παιδιά τους στο σχολείο μας. Συγκεκριμένα χθες ήρθε ένας μαθητής μας που δεν τον γνωρίσαμε, γιατί όταν τον ρωτήσαμε πόσο χρόνο είσαι, μας είπε ότι είναι 30 ετών. Και τον είχαμε όταν εδώ ήταν 7 χρονών παιδάκι. Βέβαια μετά από 23 χρόνια ήταν φυσικό να μην τον γνωρίσουμε.
Πόσοι μαθητές νομίζετε έχουν περάσει από το σχολείο?
Από τον έχουν περάσει πάνω από 5.000.
They're finally finishing the facade of the church after 30 years of ikotomi, of building, which wasn't Bishop Petros's idea originally, but he allowed it to happen on one condition, that the new church would be built around the old church, and when the construction is done, to wheelbarrow out the fragments of the old church. No, it wasn't Bishop Petros's idea. He preferred to keep the church simple as it was, as he started it. But he allowed it to happen under one condition, that none of the services would be interrupted during this building project. I was maybe in my mid-teens helping out wheelbarrowing the old church, along with a monk at the time, Bishop, Pater Christodoulos, who's Bishop Christodoulos now. And, you know, it's almost done after 30 years.
Παρθενίαν τηρήσας αδιάφορον, ουρανής θαλάμης νησίνη ρύθμισε, του Πατρός το ασεργές ποκρούσασα, τους μαστούς και κεφαλήν απετμήθης παρά αυτού, Markella χείου το κλαίος, και νίνος μαρτιστευθήσα, πηγή θαυμάτων αυτόνος δείκνυσε. Όταν αποφάσισε και βοηθήθηκε για να έχει ένα ορισμένο ποσό να πάρει την Αγία Μαρκέλα, πήγε την Αγία Μαρκέλα και εν τω μεταξύ, επειδή του άρεσε πάρα πολύ το συγγραφικό έργο και εκτός από τα συγγραφικά του έργα έγραψε και ορισμένα πολιτίκια. Μεταξύ αυτών ήταν και το πολιτίκιο της Αγίας Μαρκέλας, το οποίο σας ψάγαμε τώρα τελευταία. Φυσικά έχει γράψει και της Αγίας Ματρώνας, έχει γράψει του Αγίου Μινά, πολλών Αγίων, των Αγίων 23 Μαρτύρων της Χίου και τα λοιπά. Επίσης υπάρχει και ένα άλλο απολυτίκιο των Αγίων Μαρτύρων, οι οποίοι δεν έχουν ακόμη εμφανιστεί, αλλά εκ παραδόσεως γνωρίζουμε ότι κάπου σε ορισμένο μέρος της Χίου είναι θαμμένα 63 παλικάρια και τους έχει γράψει ένα ορισμένο πολιτίκιο και για αυτά τα οποία ακόμη δεν έχουν βρει τον κατάλληλο Άγιο άνθρωπο για να εμφανιστούν. Δεν μας τρομάζουν φύλακες, πειναδαρνηστερήσεις, δεν μας φοβίζουν διωγμοί και μυριάλες θλίψεις. Είμεθα όλοι έτοιμοι να γίνουμε θυσία, το αίμα μας να χύσουμε για την Ορθοδοξία. Το αίμα μας να χύσουμε για την Ορθοδοξία.
How will Bishop Petros be remembered? Well, many ways, but the most enduring part of his legacy was his participation, his struggle to reestablish the apostolic succession of the Greek Orthodox Church. Without his co-workers like St. Chrysostomos of Florina, Archbishop Akakios of Athens, Archbishop Chrysostomos of Athens, the martyr, St. Catherine Rutis, and all the other strugglers of the old calendar movement, there would be no Greek Orthodox Church today. But Christ worked through these people. So we know that the church never would have disappeared. But it was through these men and women that we have a Greek Orthodox Church today. And we are all reaping the benefits of that. When all the other legacy monuments of Bishop Petros, his Greek school, his cathedral, his spiritual children, when they're all gone, when all the viewers watching this program are gone, including myself, the church will endure. The Greek Orthodox Church that was reestablished by those hierarchs, his co-workers and he himself.